Ever since their inception, Toons have been a fan favorite. However, the deck has definitely had its growing pains, in a sense that it's rarely been able to keep pace with the evolving meta, even after the release of their most recent bout of support. Not surprisingly, the biggest problem surrounding Toon decks is consistency with the secondary problems of inability to consistently control the board, due to the inability to attack on the summon's turn, and a lot of the unique effects of the archetype demand the presence of Toon World on the field. So with these deficiencies to contend with, what does my Toon deck look like? Looking at the existing support for Toons first, one of the newest Toon monsters is Ancient Gear Golem. Golem is one of those in-between cards in a sense, because while it can protect itself from Mirror Force variants, which are, in a sense, the scourge of the Toon deck because of their ability to evade the protections offered by Toon Kingdom, the 2 tribute cost of Golem frequently provides too much inconsistency. While it can be used with the new Ancient Gear support, the addition of that support with Toon support in a hybrid of sorts produces significant inefficiencies. For Toons do not offer any type of real advantage to the Ancient Gear strategy, and Ancient Gears do not really do a lot for Toons either. Overall, while Golem is an option, it's one that I do not prefer. Blue Eyes Toon Dragon is the original boss Toon, and as a Class A or original Toon monster, it has the nice innate special summoning ability that can even be used with a card like Scapegoat, in addition to having some synergy with existing Blue Eyes support. However, the usefulness of that innate special summoning ability is of course significantly reduced by the inability to attack on the turret summoned. Also, running Blue Eyes in Toons creates some of the same issues as the Ancient Gear hybrid mentioned above. Similar to Golem, Blue Eyes Toon is an option. For a consistency standpoint, there are better choices. Toon Buster Blader is cute, but just that, I guess. Skip it, for Blader support is nowhere near in the class of Ancient Gear, Blue Eyes, or even Red Eyes support. Toon Barrel Dragon has been so significantly power creeped that there really is no point to even considering it. One of the newest Toon monsters, and one of the few that actually has a unique effect, largely because there is nothing it can copy, seeing that its inspiration has no effect, Toon Dark Magician. TDM has a lot going for it. Dark attribute, spellcaster type, it's a Toon, so it's got all the Toon characteristics, and you can net either a high-quality searching ability or a Toon special summons ability from the deck. Unfortunately, while TDM has all of these nice attributes, none of them actually address the problems of the Toon archetype. The summons effect is not quick play, nor does it directly sidestep the summoning sickness aspect of Toons. They can't attack on the turn they're summoned, and there is no need for it on the field now Toon monster that nets an effect when it's summoned, that its versatility can make this special summons from the deck effect critically useful. TDM's summoning ability only really helps in making XZ plays, but for the most part, when you're making XZ plays with multiple Toon monsters, in my opinion, that's taking a step back rather than a step forward. The Toon card's search effect is heavily marred by 2 of the 3 best Toon cards not having Toon in their names, thus they are not searchable. Konami, who is responsible for this oversight? Overall, a majority of the time, you'll probably just be snatching a Toon Kingdom with this search effect, if you get the search effect off with all of the things that it has to dodge that your opponent could play to negate it or just outright destroy TDM. Even with this issue, TDM would have been amazing if it only had the innate special summoning ability possessed by the first generation of Toons or Toon Dark Magician Girl. Sadly, it does not, so if you want to special summon it, you have to use some card effect for it, which is not a big deal, but it's something and reduces consistency and increases brickiness. These deficiencies in this effect lead me not to run any copies. I can see somebody wanting to run one copy, but overall, it's just not that useful in the way I run Toon. Yeah, I know, sacrilege. Red Eyes Toon Dragon is another newer support card, but overall it suffers from the same problems of TDM in that it does not ameliorate any of the weaknesses of the Toon archetype. Swarming can be somewhat useful if Kingdom is on the field, but it's basically worthless if it's not on the field. Again, making XZ plays with just Toon monsters is a step backwards most of the time. Red Eye's Toon Dragon can use Red Eye support, which is definitely useful, but again, the problem is that the hybrid just doesn't seem to be helpful despite the increased speed of getting Red Eye's Toon Dragon on the field faster. Again, similar to the other two tribute tunes, Red Eye's Toon Dragon is definitely an option, but I feel there are just better options to promote consistency in playmaking. Manga Ryuran is nothing worth talking about, just skip it. Toon Summon Skull is another Type A toon, but while it is only a single tribute toon, its lack of anything special to offer besides being a 2500 attacker tends to leave it on the cutting room floor. Toon Dark Magician Girl is the only toon that can actually attack on the turn it is summoned, and the lack of this summoning sickness aspect goes a long way in her viability as a card. Also, it can special summon itself with a single tribute, and unlike the Type A's, does not have to pay life points to attack. Unfortunately, it does require Toon World to be on the field to summon it in the first place. However, thanks to the lack of summoning sickness, Toon Dark Magician Girl is a nice choice as a 1 or 2 copy card for a quick and cheap 2000 direct attack when a Toon World is on the field. Based on the way I run this deck, I actually like Toon Dark Magician Girl at 2 copies. Toon Cyber Dragon can be a popular choice solely for making Cyber Dragon Infinity plays in a Toon deck via Nova through a Panzer Dragon instant fusion. However, as a standalone card, it's rather bad because due to the effect of Kingdom and their summoning sickness, Toons are more of a control deck than an explosive deck. Therefore, if you're not going to pursue the Infinity strategy like I choose not to do, Toon Cyber Dragon is just not worth running at all. So 0 copies for me. The Summoning Sickness feature of Toons, in addition to the defense position switch natural characteristic, sinks any viability for Toon Goblin attack force. Toon Gemini Elf is basically staple in any Toon deck, not surprisingly, similar to Dark Magician. Due to its inspiration having no natural effect, it has its own unique effect of forcing a random discard from the opponent's hand. At 1900 attack, and not requiring any tribute, while retaining Toon characteristics, at least 2 copies are advised. I run 3. Toon Mermaid can be an interesting choice in some Toon decks that want to try to rank 4 spam due to its innate special summoning ability when Toon World is on the field, but I choose to take my build in a different direction because Mermaid does not address the problems of the Toon deck, and without Toon World, Mermaid is just a bricky mess of a card. Mermaid's also hurt by the fact that she is the only level 4 Toon that has this innate special summoning capacity of the initial Toon monster. If there were 1, 2, maybe 3 more Toons like her, so that you could basically just run a pure rank 4 spam Toon deck, 4 or 5 of these Toons in a single turn, then Mermaid would be interesting. Since that's not the case and probably never will be the case, Mermaid's pretty much cutting room floor. Toon Cannon Soldier is definitely a single copy tech option, especially thanks to the TDM summon from the deck effect. You don't need to worry about really figuring out where he is. You don't even need to bother searching him with table of contents. You can just put Toon Dark Magician on the field, grab him. There's 1,000 damage right there after you've attacked directly for 2,500 with Toon Dark Magician, assuming this wasn't the turn you summoned him. However, in my experience, Cannon Soldier commonly ends up being a rather throwaway waste of a card rather than a useful finisher. Toon Masked Sorcerer is definitely a solid card, for drawing is almost never bad. The non-Toon version of Masked Sorcerer has always struggled despite its nice effect because of its low attack. That problem is obviously less pronounced in its Toon version for obvious reasons. It can direct attack when a Toon World is on the field. However, the low attack is still relevant because while Kingdom protects Toon Masked from destruction, when Toon Masked is attacked, as we all remember from Arc V, you still take the damage. And with only 900 attack, that can be a lot of damage and add up somewhat quickly. However, with that said, I do like running 2 copies because it's still one of the best overall tunes available, largely because you can put it on the field without having to tribute anything. Moving on to the spells and traps, Shadow Tune is a nice card for specifically built Tune OTK builds, but in more consistent builds, it's just a throwaway card that promotes inconsistency. For the damage you're going to be inflicting is rather insignificant relative to the value of the card itself. Toon Rollback is one of those cards that has its moments, especially with TDM's search effect, but in my experience, it just seems to produce more dead draws than game changing plays. I think part of the problem is that Toon Rollback is a card more suited for explosive plays, while the summoning sickness associated with tunes tends to temper that explosive capacity. Thereby, Toon Rollback tends to be more of a dead card than a useful card, despite the searching ability of Toon Dark Magician. Mimicat is one of the 2 best Toon support cards, with the ability to yoink, in a sense, any card from the opponent's graveyard. Unfortunately, without Toon in its name, it is not searchable via Toon Table of Contents or TDM, and its activation conditions are not that easy, demanding a Toon World on the field and a Toon monster. Also, there is the issue of a meaningful card being in the opponent's graveyard that you actually want to steal in the first place. Unfortunately for Mimicat, there's just a card that turns out to be better over the long haul. 3 copies of Toon Table of Contents is basically mandatory in any Toon deck because, at its worst, it's a 3-card deck thin where the first searches the second searches the third searches some monster, and you put that monster on the field. The original requirement for running any type of Toon deck at all, Toon World has pretty much been power creeped by Toon Kingdom. Although it'd be nice if Toon Kingdom still had that 1,000 life point cost. I'd rather pay 1,000 life points than dump 3 cards from my top of my deck face down banished. However, as I said though, I just feel running Toon World's just not worth it. Toon Kingdom all the way. Comic Hand is the other best Toon support card apart from Kingdom. It is basically a snatch steal without the life point gain for the opponent as long as a Toon World is on the field. The great thing about Comic Hand is the targeted monster gains the base characteristics of a Toon. And because it is already on the field, there's no type of summoning sickness restriction associated with that particular quote-unquote Toon, so it can attack directly right away. Comic Hand provides a rather significant momentum swing if you can get it off, because not only does your opponent lose probably their best monster, but they take typically 2,000 plus direct damage right to face. Due to the strength of this card, I like running 2 copies. Although there are definitely times when it can just sit in your hand and you wish it was something else. Toon Kingdom is the centerpiece of a Toon deck. Therefore, 3 copies is mandatory. For Toon monsters, Kingdom is rather incredible, giving any Toon monster Magispector characteristics at the cost of banishing 1 card face down from the deck when it would be destroyed. Also, it acts as a Toon World on the field. Good thing, otherwise it'd be kind of worthless. I'm not sure Toon Kingdom, despite the protection effect, would be playable if it didn't act like Toon World. Despite the general usefulness of Kingdom, it has been much maligned for not protecting itself. However, if it protected itself, it probably would be too powerful. Overall, my strategy is not to directly try to protect Kingdom because most of the cards that facilitate this role are bricky and too weak and specific. Thus, most of the time, they'll just be dead in your hand if you don't have Kingdom on the field. Also, the opponent can play around a number of these cards because most of them just have the unfortunate, in this day and age of Yu-Gi-Oh!, the lackluster effect of this card can't be destroyed. Well, the opponent has numerous ways of removing a card from the field that does not involve destroying it. Instead of trying to protect Kingdom, I just take advantage of Kingdom as long as I can while it's on the field. Toon Briefcase is not a bad card, but there are better options in my opinion. Its major strength is it's searchable via Toon Dark Magician or Toon Table of Contents, but if only it were a counter trap. For one of the biggest problems of Toons is field control, and Briefcase being a 1-for-1 has trouble maintaining that field, especially when your opponent is still allowed to use on summons effect or quick play effects relative to its activation. At least if it were a counter trap, it would have snuffed those out. Toon Mask is one of the few tools the archetype has to circumvent the problem associated with its summoning sickness. Another advantage is it's searchable via toon-based methods. Unfortunately, it is a trap versus being a quick play spell, which would have been better, and it requires Toon World on the field. Mask is definitely a valid choice for this deck, but I choose to go a different direction largely because if you don't run the big heavy hitters like I don't, Mask loses a lot of its significant importance. Because, sure, I guess it's nice to summon a Toon Gemini Elf during your opponent's end phase. It's not something that you look at the field and say, oh, now momentum's going to hugely shift in my favor. So, largely, if you run Toon Dark Magician, if you run Red Eyes, think about running Mask. If you don't run Mask. With the release of Toon Kingdom, Toon Defense has basically been rendered worthless because Kingdom protects from battle destruction at a significantly lower life point cost. For the non-Toon monsters, I run my standard field control staple support in 3 copies of Fairy Tale Luna and 1 copy of Fairy Tale Snow. For those that have seen a lot of my recent deck builds, I tend to like running Luna and Snow in decks that have trouble producing field control within their own archetype, and Toons definitely have that issue, again, due to that pesky, oh, I can't attack on the turn I summon my Toon monster. So Luna and Snow definitely provide an aid to field control, especially if you don't have a means to get Kingdom on the field, or your Kingdom is removed from the field. I like running 3 copies of Juragedo for the attack increase, life point gain, defensive characteristics, summoning it during your opponent's battle phase, and rank 4 potential. For remember, I said that making XZ plays with multiple Toon monsters is typically a step back, but making an XZ play with a Juragedo and a single Toon monster, it's a nice secondary option, especially when Kingdom isn't available. You normal summon your Toon monster, battle phase, special summon Juragedo, make your rank 4 XZ play during main phase 2. I also choose to run one of the better forgotten tech monsters that, in my opinion, should be seeing more play in how the meta is currently structured, but I can understand why it doesn't. 2 copies of Kycoo the Ghost Destroyer, which prevents banishing by the opponent, has a solid 1800 attack, and is a dark monster. Finally, I run 2 copies of Eater of Millions for extra deck space in this build. It is quite sparing, and it definitely can't afford to give up even 10 monsters if you need to summon both copies of Eater of Millions during the course of the duel. Most of the time, 1 copy tends to be what I run because, while if you run multiple copies, you'll see it more often. It becomes a dead card because usually it's tough to give up more than 5 monsters for a summons. In this deck, as mentioned, that's just not a problem. Another possible option that I do not run is Chocolate Magician Girl, which acts as a nice attack staller in addition to producing some level of draw power. The problem I have with Chocolate is she is almost entirely defensive, for her 1600 cannot attack over a lot, and the opponent will almost never attack her unless he or she has huge advantage in doing so. And there's definitely not the deck space to put in little techie combos to try to force your opponent to attack her. Some may argue in her favor, well, it forces the opponent to use some form of removal on her, and that is true. Overall, Chocolate just doesn't produce enough of a oomph factor in this deck for me to consider running her. For the remainder of the spells, I run the standard staple lineup of 1 copy of Raigeki, 1 copy of Soul Charge, and 2 copies of Darkhole. Darkhole is definitely an interesting card because of Kingdom's protection effect. It protects all Toon monsters from destruction, not just destruction by opponent card effect. So you can drop a Darkhole and banish a few cards off the top of your deck, face down, and you'll be fine. 2 copies of Scapegoat are nice for stalling. Link monster summoning as extra firepower, for the links are rather pointless in this deck because you don't go into the extra deck that much to begin with, and as tribute fodder for Toon Dark Magician Girls. Draw power in this deck is definitely important for increasing Toon Kingdom acquisition probability. I run 2 copies of Allure of Darkness and 1 copy of Upstart Golbin. Finally, I run one copy of Magical Dimension as a piece of interruption that can be activated during the opponent's turn to evade Summoning Sickness with Toon Gemini Elf and Toon Mass Sorcerer. The nice thing about Magical is it only requires a monster tribute for the spellcaster on the field, not the tribute of a spellcaster monster, so Scapegoat tokens can work fine as the tribute for its effect. Some may question the lack of terraforming, but this is not designed to be an explosive Toon deck, so getting Kingdom is not of desperate importance, and Table of Contents basically replaces it. For the traps, of course I run my one staple of Torrential Tribute. Finishing the traps, this deck definitely needs some form of monster negation element. The two best options seem to be Lose One Turn or Lost Wind. The strengths of Lose One Turn is its continuality, the fact that attacking over the newly placed into defense position monsters is a thing in Toon decks, and that your opponent is hurt much more than you due to the general lack of special summoning in this deck. The weakness of Lose One Turn is it only delays monsters with quick play effects instead of completely neutralizing them, and Tornado Dragon and Trident can certainly hurt this deck a lot at the start of your turn. Lost Wind strengths are permanent negations, so you don't have to worry about those Tridents or Tornado Dragons, commonly multiple uses, and attack reduction, allowing monsters to commonly hit over stronger monsters your opponent possesses when Kingdom is not available to swing directly. While both choices are solid, I prefer 3 copies of Lost Wind to Lose One Turn. The extra deck for this build is basically completely wide open. Run your favorite rank 4s and link monsters for Scapegoat. If you choose to use Instant Fusion, run your most useful cards that can be summoned by Instant Fusion. For my extra deck, I run the following. 1 Norito, the Moral Leader. 1 copy, number 24, Dragon Nosferatu Dragulas. 1 Performage Trapeze Magician. 1 number 66, Master Key Beetle. 1 Cairngorgon Antiluminescent Knight. 1 number 103, Ragna 0. 1 Tornado Dragon. 1 Castel the Skyblaster Musketeer. 1 Abyss Dweller. 2 Gagaga Cowboys. Now the reason I run 2 Gagaga Cowboys is you can summon a Juragedo during your opponent's battle phase, and then you can summon a second Juragedo during your battle phase. And it's not too difficult to have 2 Toons sitting on your field, so during your main phase 2 of that turn, you can go into double Cowboy and burn for 1600. 2 Link Spiders, 1 Mrs. Radiant, and 1 Decode Talker. In the end, there seems to be 2 major strategies to running a Toon deck: explosive or control. The problems with the explosive version of Toons, in my opinion, is first consistency, because it involves running a lot of Toons, especially high-level Toons like Red Eyes Toon Dragon and Toon Dark Magician, which can produce significant brick hands because those cards can't innately special summon themselves. Second, it is more reliant on Toon World being on the field, largely in the form of Toon Kingdom, but this reliance can divide the deck strategy between explosive tools and Kingdom searching and protection, which creates more inconsistency. Therefore, the best way to run explosive Toons, in my opinion, is just forego protection and hope that the opponent has no countermeasures for Kingdom, swarm turn 1, try to OTK them turn 2 by attacking with your entire swarm directly. In my experience, though, this strategy does not work out well from a consistency standpoint. This is probably why people don't see Toon decks topping in tournaments, because despite this lack of consistency, the explosive version seems to be the way most people like to run Toons. I like running this type of build, which focuses more on control and consistency. The concern with this deck is that it can be outpaced because it commonly has a boring, especially relative to other decks, first turn, regardless of whether or not you go first, because of that summoning sickness aspect, and the lack of the innate special summoning in the deck. To compensate for this first turn deficiency, I run cards like Lost Wind, Dark Hole, Scapegoat, etc. This control version is quite good at grinding and is almost like a snowball type deck. It takes a little while for it to get rolling down the hill, so to speak, but once it starts rolling, the longer the duel goes on, the progressively more and more difficult for your opponent to deal with it. Overall, the biggest issue with any Toon deck, explosive or control, is the management of Toon Kingdom. Without protection, Kingdom is quite vulnerable. Even with protection, it's typically vulnerable. Most smart opponents will commonly not destroy Kingdom right when you throw it down, but instead, they'll wait with a quick play effect for a more promising time, be it when you attempt to attack directly over a bigger monster or when you activate a card like Comic Hand to really twist the knife, so to speak, of them destroying your Toon Kingdom. So with this said, I think the best way to play Toons is not depend entirely on Kingdom, just play Kingdom smart, but not be too broken up about it when you can't ride it to victory, and always have secondary strategies, which is what this deck attempts to produce. Well, that is my Toon deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.